So, how I got into the satire is I was interviewing mushroom entrepreneurs, and that's what I still do. Every Friday, I put out a new podcast, and that's actually become quite lucrative because over 5 years of this, 240 something episodes, lots of other short interviews. I've just built this really cool network of people all over the world who leverage the potential of mushrooms. It's not just psychedelics, right? There's people making materials, there's people building houses out of mushrooms. Someone just built a surfboard that is commercially available in France. They've got a skateboard. So, like, I'm doing all these interviews, and after about a year, especially the psychedelic ones, I was just like, just everyone's treating this just like a business, like they're shipping units of apple juice, right? This is mushrooms. This is like one of the weirdest, strangest, furthest out thing. And we've got all these like CEOs now who are trying to turn it into this commercial interest where they're treating it like it belongs on the NASDAQ stock exchange. So it just created this really wonderful set and setting for humor. And I, in particular, found a lot of humor around these kind of, like I mentioned, I'm white, obviously. I've encountered this a lot where, like, God bless the confidence of a white man. You know, a white man goes in, has a psychedelic experience, and then the next thing you know, like, they want to launch a company, they want to, be on featured on Forbes and Rolling Stone and stuff like that as a thought leader. And to me, there's just something really beautiful about trying to kind of like take the ego down a little bit. That's sort of what psychedelics for a lot of people are intended to do, or what it often gets promoted. Like, you have ego death. But I would challenge that. I think a lot of people, it shows, maybe it's the opposite. You have ego amplification. There's a sense of, I am great. I am the best. I am going to dominate. And to me, satire is a great way of kind of taking people down a peg in a beneficial way. And then I started to learn that this is something historically that various cultures have seen the value in. So, like, with the archetypal role of the jester, right? And the actual Renaissance, not the psychedelic Renaissance, but like Renaissance Europe, there was usually a jester in the king's court. And the express role of the jester is to bring the king down a notch a little bit. It's to make fun of him. It's because nobody else could do it. If one of the peasants makes fun of the king, they would get their head chopped off. But it was the jester's job to sort of make the king laugh and to lampoon the king. And again, this kind of archetypal figure has shown up in different cultures. And the idea, as far as I understand it, is that they don't want the king to get too full of himself. Like, there has to be some element of humanness. And part of humanness is having a sense of humility and being able to look at yourself and being like, you know what? I am being a little bit of a jerk right now. I don't know if it always works, but that's my understanding of the jester's role. Is that there's sort of like an archetypal role, just the way that, like, there's different figures in a culture. Like, you have your king and you have your soldier and you have your damsel in distress. Well, you also have the jester, and that this is a super important role. So yeah, I mean, I have fun with it. And the litmus test I use for if something's worth doing is if it is funny for me. I think, humor is very authentic. It's very complicated. Like, what is humor? Where does it come from? What makes something funny? There's so many different cultural tropes that are tied to that. About, if I tell you a joke, like, it gets translated from Latvian to English, it might not be funny, right? I used to host exchange students. Sometimes, like, the Russians would tell me a joke. It's not funny. Like, but it's hilarious in Russian, because you have to be able to understand the culture and the context and why it's funny. And that's a lot of humor. So to me, what makes it really cool to do psychedelic humor and mushroom humor is it means that the culture has evolved to a point where people have these shared ideas about why something is funny. Like, if you were to tell mushroom jokes or DMT jokes a few years ago, they'd have to be pretty surface level. But now you can talk about DMT entities in the joke and people know what you're talking about. Or you can talk about, like, ego death with the mushrooms. People know what you're talking about. This just means that the culture has grown, so we have a shared language. So I think that's another interesting point with the satire.